trying to catch that negative momentum early on and turning it into positive momentum. And I think it applies the same way with the goals that we set in business.
Does. 1,000% it does. I mean, you get what you focus on.
Yeah.
You focus on the negative, you'll get more negative. You focus on the positive, and positive will come.
Yeah.
And it's such a farcical thing that people think it's like, it's easy for you to say, and it's like, how do you think we got here?
Yeah.
How do you think all these years culminated to today? To me telling you this, to talking to you, to having this conversation with people that need to hear this. It's because you put that in your head and you dwelled on it and you went back to it and you pushed out all the negative stuff and all the stuff that you said that you did and then it didn't work out and your brain's going, don't do that again. We've been down that road. It doesn't work out. It's because you're intentional about the way you think, what you want to do, your purpose, how you want people to perceive you, how you want to be taken. So like, how do you want to be perceived?
This is partners in the process, 'cause we're built better together.
Welcome to Partners in the Process today. We've got Trevor Rosenthal. Trevor, thank you so much for coming out and meeting with us. A lot of you guys might know him for his Major League Baseball career, and that's how we know him as well. But Trevor has recently decided to hang up his cleats and start a new chapter of his life, and so he's here today actually to talk about family, entrepreneurship, and what life's going to look like after Major League Baseball, right?
That's right.
All right, so we're going to jump right into it. Kind of already been talking to him beforehand and started getting into the weeds, so we're going to jump back into that though. So, with your family and like, how long was it before you got into Major League Baseball that you guys were married?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for having me here today. Really looking forward to this, and based off of our short time together before this conversation, very impressive people, and so I'm happy that you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy to be a part of this and what you guys are doing, and hopefully provide some value from my story.
Absolutely.
Well, I think people want to see this side of you too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I've watched a ton of the stuff that you're putting out right now because you've got a lot of content. You're putting it and building a brand yourself right now.
Yep.
And obviously, it's all centered around baseball. It's a ton of stuff around baseball.
Yeah.
But there's like a lot of the backstory. It's like the back office to a business. You know what I mean? You see all the stuff getting done up front, but how does ever the parts move around on the backside? You know, that's your family life.
Yeah.
Especially in a personal brand. So I think people would like to know like who you really are also as a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Not just this figure that they idolize. So.
Yeah, and we were talking about this. I mean, you think of pro sports players and you think of sports in general, and it is a game, like, right? Like, it's super fun. It's something that we all dream of doing, especially if you're an athlete at a young age and you aspire to do that sport as long as you can. But what I realized is, yes, it was a game, but it very quickly became a business. Shortly after I was drafted and got into professional baseball, luckily, I realized the opportunity that I had to, be successful financially and provide for my family. And that's, going back to your question, where I met my wife. I met my wife when I was in my first year of minor league baseball. I was in my rookie season with the St. Louis Cardinals. We were in Johnson City, Tennessee, playing for the Johnson City Cardinals. And at that time, my wife was in nursing school at East Tennessee State University. And we kept running into each other. If you ever been to East Tennessee, if you haven't, I recommend you go. Beautiful country, but very small town. So after a baseball game, after she would get off of her out of her classes and get off of work at the restaurant job that she was working in, there was only so many places that you could go, and we kept running into each other in those places. And I would say at that time I was very lucky to have ran into her at that time in my life, because like I mentioned, to me, I was just playing baseball, having a good time. Still, I was young, 19 years old, and had kind of a carefree, invincible type of mindset. And it was during that first season in professional baseball where I started to understand the opportunity that baseball presented as a business. But then now with this beautiful woman, this woman that I cared so deeply about, I realized that I wanted to provide for her and protect her as best I could. So I at that time began to have a mindset shift of, okay, I'm going to take this serious, and I'm not going to make decisions or choices that jeopardize the opportunity that's in front of me.
That's pretty critical that you saw that early, because that's a mistake that we see a lot when you're living, especially a fast, hard life like that, where you've got a lot that could go wrong if you don't treat it correctly, you don't foster the relationship correctly, or you don't foster the business correctly. And people think that it's never going to end. But if you take time to actually recognize what this could be and be intentional about the way that you treat it from the get-go, that pays dividends 10, 20 years down the road from now, you know?
Because we
100%.
met at like 19 years old also and stuff like that. And so you also learn that that person kind of keeps you centered and grounded a little bit to where you don't want to mess up what you've got going on and stuff. And so it just kind of helps that connection grow and both of you kind of grow together.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's wonderful.
So did she finish nursing school then?
She did.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a really cool story. So we actually got engaged and married pretty quickly. And the week after our wedding, the week after we got married, she graduated from nursing school. And at that time, we moved from East Tennessee to Kansas City, where my parents were living. And so we moved into my parents' house. I was still in the minor leagues, and she took a job at KU Med Center in the neurological unit at KU Med as a nurse. And that was her first job. And that year was the beginning of my really like flourishment in professional baseball. I had the opportunity to go to Major League Spring Training for the first time. And jump through from the low levels to the high levels of the minor leagues really quickly, and then ultimately that year made my debut in Major League Baseball. So it was for two young kids trying to figure out life and being thrust into the light of fame and fortune. There was certainly a lot on our plate and a lot of long-lasting repercussions from the choices that we were making that were gonna determine the outcome for the rest of our lives.
So that's not something that obviously everybody gets to experience. So can you explain to us how the impact of like that stardom and money and stuff like that? Because I mean, I don't know if you came from money or had some or whatever, if you grew up, however you grew up, but like take for instance us. We didn't really grow up. We grew up with everything we needed and a little bit extra, but we didn't have a ton of anything. So when you get to a point in your life when like you can maybe afford some of the nicer things or do some stuff for you or spend money, it's a weird feeling, A, and B, like, how does that affect your relationship negatively and positively? And were you able to, like, recognize that and be like, hey, we got to be very careful here, just like you were intentional earlier. If we don't treat this right, it could, like, blow us apart if we're not careful. Because you guys have been together for how many years now?
We'll be married 13 years this December.
Right. So, I mean, that's a testament of time there. You were able to get through this. So how did you do it?
Yeah, so because I'm 34. I won't say my wife's age, but she's close age. She looks much younger than her age. But I mean, at 34 to be married 13 years and have 3 kids, relatively young, and I feel that we've experienced a lot of the challenges of life in a very short window, or maybe a shorter window compared to the average person.
At an advanced level as well.
At an advanced level.
Yes.
And fame and fortune definitely factored into that. Right. And I will say we were lucky. We come from good families and, good, just lower middle class families that never made money more of a priority than what it should have been, and it was always kept in its proper place. And so we were lucky to have that influence, and then especially or even more so at that time, to have the influence of veteran players, of the people that were in our circle that were giving us good information, of letting us know, especially in pro sports, like your earning window is so short. Like, yes, the checks may be larger, but those checks have to last for a long period of time. Right. So we were exercising the muscle of saving, exercising the muscle of planning for the future, and not so much focused on, we can go buy a new car right now. And so I was lucky for that in that sense, but it does present a lot of challenges because money in a lot of cases at any level can become a terrible master. And that's my I guess one piece of encouragement for anybody is whether you're a blue collar or working a blue collar job and looking at professional athletes and envious of celebrities and their net worth, if you're constantly just looking at other people and comparing your life to others in terms of net worth, you're going to go down the wrong path. Right. And you're going to end up living a life and making choices that aren't the most beneficial. And I say that because I've made mistakes. We all have things that I wish I could go back and change, and regrets that I have. But that's one thing that has always stood out is, especially in the world that we live in, is money can be put as a master in so many cases, and we can pursue that, and that pursuit isn't necessarily bad. Money is important, and my encouragement is make as much money as you can. It's important not only to make money, but for all the things that come of it, because it's much easier. Life changes a lot when you can make decisions and choices that aren't centered around the income that you need to support yourself. So the freedom that you can leverage for yourself by making good financial choices is very important.
Because the opportunities that it opens up for you and different things that you can do. Absolutely.
Because I mean, it's a tool,
Yeah.
ultimately. It's ultimately a tool, and it buys you freedom is what it really buys you.
It does.
You know, choices. It buys you choices. And
Yeah.
that's something we're a huge proponent of is living for a purpose versus chasing the money. And then, you know, money will come, but money really just buys you choices. It gives you options.
Yeah.
You know, and if you look at it that way and don't become a slave to it, like you mentioned, it doesn't rule your life. It doesn't dictate the decisions that you make. You don't make decisions based off of that. You make decisions based off what's correct to do.
Yeah.
And financially, however financially rewarding or that's what'll happen is what'll happen.
Yeah.
But you still did what you should have done and what was right.
Yeah.
For a purpose, you know.
Yeah.
But just going back to like once you went, you know, got your major league debut and that, and you guys are together. You're living in Kansas City at that point.
We started living in full time in St. Louis at that time.
St. Louis?
Yeah, so it was actually really cool. And so I made my debut in 2012. That year we had, I mean, I was so lucky in St. Louis. We had great teams all the way through, and we went up to the NLCS, so the National League Championship Series that year, and we ended up losing to the San Francisco Giants. And after that last game, we were sitting in the clubhouse in a circle full of my teammates, and there was a guy sitting at the table who had a home that he lived in during the season in St. Louis, but that wasn't his primary residence. In the offseason, he moved back to Georgia, and he offered to let my wife and I stay in his house for the off season. So that was the beginning of kind of putting roots into St. Louis, and from there we spent the better part of 12 years from that point on in St. Louis, and half of that time in that house. Actually, we ended up renting that house and then ultimately buying that house from that player.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I would assume during that time, at some point, you guys start to become a bit under a microscope. Like people know who you are, they know your name, they watch your number, you know, they're wearing your jersey, different things like that as time goes on. How do you guys as a couple mitigate the stress that brings? Like, because all your stuff's out there.
Yeah.
You know, it's something about us is a pressure, something about us that we've always, our anonymity or being a little bit more private. But when we got into stepping out more and talking to people about us and how we do life and family and stuff, we have to put more out there. You know what I mean? And sometimes that's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So how do you guys deal with that stress and that pressure of being a little bit more of a public figure than being
and still pretty
private?
young
And very young, yeah.
Very young. And so I will say, you know, obviously I mentioned my wife and how important she is to me, and that never changed throughout this whole time. Obviously things started to come into our life. You know, like you mentioned, when you walk around town and people know, oh, that's Trevor Rosenthal, you know, that can have a certain type of effect on you, especially at a young age and having never experienced that before. But I was lucky to have, you know, the recognition of, you know, my wife and my family are what's most important.
Yeah.
Baseball is, you know, it's what I do, but it's not, you know, I'm more than willing to sacrifice baseball for the betterment of my family if I had to. So keeping those things in perspective. But even furthermore, we were very lucky to have some very strong mentors in our life. So Matt Holliday and his wife Leslie Holliday. Matt Holliday's a Hall of Famer in St. Louis, and I believe a Hall of Fame player in Major League Baseball.
I don't
as a
think
whole.
if you're in baseball or not, you should know who Matt Holliday is if you're from St. Louis.
Well, it's not very common to see a guy with forearms as big as your thighs, so he stands out. And even the Holliday name is very big still to this day in baseball. It's in their blood. But I say that we were lucky to have them as mentors for whatever reason. That first year that I mentioned in 2012 in spring training, this big burly guy took me under his wing, and he saw whatever he saw in me and said, hey, I want to look out for you. So him and his wife, they lived in St. Louis during the off season, during the wintertime as well. And they were constantly inviting us over, having us over for dinner, and just having us around them outside of work, outside of baseball. Right. And I didn't realize how big of an influence or the intentionality behind it. But what that created is much like our conversation today. Is the purpose is to see kind of behind the curtains, and we were able to see their relationship and their priorities behind the curtains. And this is a guy who's on $100 and whatever million contract. Yeah. Right. He's the biggest name in the city, and to see him being intentional about how he's spending time with his wife and his kids, and the intentionality just to make that the priority in the little things that he did. He wasn't concerned about filling up the garage with really cool cars. Like, he was concerned about the influence that his kids were having at the home and being present with them as much as he could, even with the demanding job. So I'm super thankful for that. And they could have played out much differently. Not everybody is like that, as we know. I mean, we see stories all the time, and eventually it seems like we all have to learn a lesson the hard way. But I was lucky at that point to have a guy who was doing things a little bit differently for whatever reason, and I didn't have to learn some of those lessons on my own.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's pretty crazy.
Because when you get to see people in real life and like in their own home and how they work together and stuff like that, it really sheds light on how you kind of want your family to be and different role models and advice that you want to take and stuff like that.
And he's a role model in the sense too of like, that's somebody that I want to be like. I want to have what he has. I want that type of career, but I also want that type of family.
Yeah.
Right.
And very lucky.
That's
awesome.
That power of being around people like that power of proximity.
Yep.
The influence that it has on people, it's subconscious and conscious if you're paying attention to it.
Yep.
You don't. I mean, they talk about show me your 5 closest friends and I'll show you the 6th. Like you're going to be just like the 5 closest people you're around. When you surround yourself by people like that, because business is like that as well.
Yep.
You surround yourself around people like that. That rubs off on you. That energy, the way they do things, especially if you idolize the way they're doing it in a healthy way. You know, that you look at it like that's something that I aspire to do. I aspire to be. That's pretty incredible that he was able to do that.
And nobody's perfect. Like,
absolutely.
Gosh, nobody is. We're not perfect.
Right.
Exactly.
Nobody is. And I never have ever claimed that we were.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I talk about that a lot too, because I don't want people to think, oh, you guys just think you're great. No, I mean, we have all the same arguments and struggles and challenges. We talked earlier about, business, and people think, well, if you have money, then you have less problems, or if you have this type of influence.
Yeah.
No, you just have different ones, or sometimes bigger ones.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're more expensive.
Yeah,
There's
100%.
more problems, you know what I
Yep.
mean? So if we're going to save anything, we got to save them.
Yep.
And everything else falls apart.
Yep.
Could be your career, could be
100%.
your marriage, it could be all of that.
Yep.
So
And you think about, I mean, marriage isn't necessarily a business, but like in terms of, financial, like getting a divorce, that takes away 50% of the assets that you've worked to get. And so in a business sense, if you're putting all of this work in to have all these accomplishments and then that gets half of that gets taken away from you, that hurts.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And then that's in your mind. It's got to be, right?
Yeah.
So like take for instance when you started, how long were you guys
Not
married?
even and then your reputation also, especially being like in the baseball field and all that kind of stuff. Your reputation's huge also.
Yeah.
Because your personal life probably.
Some of it probably gets thrown out there.
Well, and if you think about marriage, like when you decide and you both get up on at that altar or in front of the preacher or whoever is officiating the marriage, at that point in time, there is no inkling in your mind that you will get a divorce and that you will split up. Right. You are both in it for the long haul, and this is a lifetime game. So, not only is it very traumatic from that physiological and psychological standpoint of what you set out to accomplish, but then all the other repercussions that come along with failure and with having to end something that you didn't plan on ever ending.
We all put our pants on the exact same way.
Exactly.
Right?
And as you put yourself out there and as you gain more success, I would argue that the challenges become even more difficult because there's more people watching. There's more people rooting for you to fail. There's more people that are going to critique every single move that you make. And that's at this point, and we can jump into this, but has really turned into a motivating factor. As I look to transition outside of baseball, as I look, what is my purpose? How can I not only protect and serve my family first and foremost, but what is the impact? What is the what is the drive that I have? And it's that I need to set the example. So the guy that's behind me or the guy that's around me, he can see me as that Matt Holliday of whatever Trevor's doing. I want to be more like him, and I hope my kids and my family get that. But I think it would be a disservice to the community to not hold myself to that standard, knowing I've made a ton of mistakes. But my point is if Trevor can do it, you sure as heck can do it, because I am no different. I am not special.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important thing for people to understand, that no matter what level of notoriety or fame or anything that somebody gets, by speaking on the imperfection, the failures, the downside of all of it, that's all learning. Yeah. You know what I mean? We learn from all those things. And so to bring that to somebody, we talk a lot about turning, decades into days, because if you can compress time through somebody else's story, you're much better off for it. So listen to what these people have to say. Yeah. When you go speak about how you take your competitive mindset and what got you into Major League and successful in that, and you're turning that into now entrepreneurship, which we're going to get into, what is it that you did to make that happen? And these are the failures, and let me save you 10 years of heartache by not taking this path. You know, I was fortunate enough to have these people around me. They taught me these things, they showed me these things, and I took this path of intentionality, and I did things by the grace of God even in the right way, and I was able to see what I didn't want to do and what I did want to do, and let me share that with you. And so what happened that made that purpose like just super apparent to you? You're like, this is it. This is what I want to do now. Yeah.
It's been, I mean, life's an ongoing race, and I believe that we're all running it at our own pace, and I try not to compare myself to one person or another. We're all on our individual journey. But there's been series of events, and, I bring it back to baseball. Early in my baseball career, I remember pitching in one of the biggest games that I had ever pitched in, and I had a great pitching coach at the time, and it was late in the innings, and I was starting to struggle, and I see the pitching coach call timeout to come out and talk to me, and I'm thinking, okay, like, this guy, he's one of the best pitching coaches I've had. Now I believe him to be one of the best pitching coaches in all of Major League Baseball, so he calls timeout. He comes out to talk to me on the mound, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to see what he has to say. He looks at me, and he says, "What the hell are you doing out here?" He says, "You need to hurry up. I'm about to shit my pants in the dugout." And he clenches his butt cheeks, and he walks back to the dugout. And I didn't understand at the time, but now I realize from a mental standpoint, I had two options. I could focus on my pitching coach's bowel movement, which would probably not lead to the results that I was trying to accomplish in that game, or I could shift my focus back to the goal that I had or in winning that game. And so that's what I did, and we ended up winning that game. But that was such an important lesson for me is, there's going to be so many distractions, especially mentally, whether it's an outside influence of somebody telling you something that you can't control, or just yourself. I mean, I found myself, the more mistakes I make, the more I realize my mind is reminding me of those mistakes and telling me, hey, you set this goal, but you failed at that before. And you're probably going to fail again, and it's an intentional override of, hey, you don't have to listen to that. Yeah. Yep. You control, ultimately, I am in control of my thoughts. I don't have to listen to my thoughts and let them take me to where they want to go. It's very similar to if you think about, like, if you get cut off on the highway when you're driving. And it's like that first reaction is like, oh, I'm so mad. Like, why did this guy do this? He's giving me the bird or whatever it may be. But I think in these terms that I can't control my initial reaction. I can't control that emotion, but I can control my second thought. And we talk about momentum in sports all the time. Like, you can easily see a team that has the momentum, and when they have that momentum, it's very hard to stop, and usually good things happen. Well, it works the same way negatively, and I believe it works the same way in our minds. And so trying to catch that negative momentum early on and turning it into positive momentum, and I think it applies the same way with the goals that we set in business.
Does. 1,000% it does. I mean, you get what you focus on. Yeah. You focus on the negative, you'll get more negative. You focus on the positive, and positive will come. Yeah. And it's such a farcical thing that people think it's like, it's easy for you to say, and it's like, how do you think we got here? Yeah. How do you think all these years culminated to today? To me telling you this, to talking to you, to having this conversation with people that need to hear this. It's because you put that in your head, and you dwelled on it, and you went back to it, and you pushed out all the negative stuff and all the stuff that you said that you did, and then it didn't work out, and your brain's going, don't do that again. We've been down that road. It doesn't work out. It's because you're intentional about the way you think, what you want to do, your purpose, how you want people to perceive you, how you want to be taken. So, like, how do you want to be perceived? Yeah. What do you want people to know? If you were this Major League Baseball player, through all your accomplishments, shifting into business now, how do you want people to remember and know you moving forward? what would be your answer for that?
Yeah, I'm early. I decided to officially retire from baseball within the last couple months. So, but this has been something that's on my mind of when I'm moving away from baseball, what am I going to move into? And the reason I would say that business and entrepreneurship is so exciting to me and something that I'm passionate and becoming more passionate about is because I realize, much like being in a locker room with the guys or on any team, when you're a leader, that comes with a lot of responsibility. And first and foremost, you have to be a leader worth following. And the way I think about business is very much in that same sense. If I'm creating teams, if I'm creating opportunities and we're on this path to accomplish a goal, well, I need to be a person that is worthy of leading and trustworthy of leading this unit into battle. And I like the idea that I'm going to continue to push myself to be a better person. And I'd like to think of myself that I haven't arrived. I most likely will never arrive. This journey that I'm on is to just continue to get better and better, and knowing that there's going to be bumps in the road. But I would love to think of my life as setting that example, as someone who others can look at and say, oh, if Trevor did this, I can do it too. And we talk about professional athletes, and we were talking about this prior to our conversation, is guys struggle. I've been around guys that have struggled, whether they ended their athletic career after college or high school, or they played 20 years in the major leagues and made a ton of money and had a Hall of Fame career. A lot of guys do struggle. And for me to think of myself as an example of the next person who's transitioning, and they can look at Trevor and say, Trevor did this, so that means that it's possible. Yeah. Right. And sometimes we just need to see that it's possible.
It's funny that it's almost like a necessity anymore. I don't know if it's a generational thing or what, but it's like people don't believe it unless they see it.
Yep.
And so unless people like you stand up and they say, hey, this is what I've been through, this is what I did, it's like they don't get the motivation or the inspiration to follow suit. They're just like, oh, that's not possible. They said it, but when you show them, they get it then.
Yep.
And so I almost feel like it's a duty of ours to share that with people. If it was given to us, I feel like now we have to share that.
And I think sometimes too, people think everything should be so easy, and it's not that easy. Like you going into the entrepreneurship, that's not going to be easy. It's trying to pick what am I going to do?
Whole level of complicated.
But I mean, and the same with the baseball. Like you being your own business, kind of like we talked about earlier. It's not easy. You didn't just fall into the major leagues. You know what I mean? The work that you had to put into that for so many years to even get to that point, it wasn't that easy, because so many people have this, it must be nice kind of mentality. And the work that has to go into some of this stuff, I think gets kind of sidelined as to you just got lucky, when in fact, so much work went into that.
So much work.
You know what I mean?
I agree. Entrepreneurship's exact same way.
Yeah,
it is.
So,
absolutely.
And like we talked about, being a professional baseball player is entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
it's on a different level. It's a full personal brand. You know what I mean?
That's where I find myself as I'm looking down the path of business. My mind is telling me, "Hey, you should just go play baseball." That's what you know.
That's where
your
you resort back to.
safety.
Yeah,
kind of your safety net. Yeah,
Exactly.
But like you said earlier, and this.
But you have to push yourself. You have to try new things for you and your family, and it'll make you better for it.
100%.
But like you had said earlier, you went and just spoke in Columbia, Missouri, and that was something fairly new to you and what you spoke on and all that stuff there. But you understand it. It's something that you probably enjoyed. How did it feel being up there? Was it a lot like being out on a baseball field?
It was.
You know what I mean?
It was addicting.
Right? It's just getting the eyeballs. For me, I don't like it's not the recognition. It's not the things people say. I'm really indifferent either way. I appreciate when people appreciate it. I really, truly do. That's why we're doing this. But it's the impact. Yeah. And when you can sit up there and talk, and you can feel the impact on people that are really watching you, because you'll see them out there, like they're really locked in, and and you're like, they get it, they feel this, they understand what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's the part that gets almost addicting. Yeah, because you're like, I think I'm helping these people. Yeah, how many more out there like that I could help? Yeah, you know what I mean? How can I share this story to help these people?
100%. Right. And there's when you play in when you play in professional sports, you play with all different kinds of people. Played with people that names will be talked about and remembered for a long time, and played with people whose names that you will never even hear or remember. And one thing that I like to talk about is in the minor leagues, it's very common, especially at the AAA level, so the level just below Major League Baseball. Guys you'll find them in the clubhouse before a game, in some free time, sitting around a table and saying things like, why haven't I gotten to the major leagues, or this guy got an opportunity before I did, and it just creates kind of like this snowball effect. And occasionally a veteran player will walk up to this group of players and hear what they're talking about, and he'll say, if you guys don't like your situation, play better. And my point is sitting around and talking about what you don't like and creating, again, that negative momentum, that's going to do nothing for you. You have to have a bias for action. You have to do something within your control. And certainly having a negative thought process is not going to get you any closer to where you want to be.
You control the controllables.
It's already hard enough to succeed at a high level. You don't want your mind working against you. And I think that relates very much so into business and in personal lives as well, right? Like 13 years of marriage, 3 kids. Yes. There's a lot of days where things don't go the way I wanted them to. There's a lot of days where the things that are happening aren't what I want to be happening. And I have to find a way to take a step back and think, what is the outcome I desire, and what are the actions that I can take to ultimately get that result, and align my thought process with that. And complaining about it, being negative about it, it's not going to help the situation.
No, and then like something that we talk a lot about too is the relationship you have with your wife. And in whatever venture you're in right now, it was baseball before, entrepreneurship, moving forward, whatever you do, the support that she offers you. We have days. We have days where it's not always.
It's not even a day. Sometimes it's a moment.
Yeah, it's moments. But when I say days, I just mean there's moments.
Times.
There's times.
Yeah.
When we're not all on the same page.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And how do we navigate that so that we can get on the same page? It's not all up to me. It's not all up to her. It's a combination of the two.
Yeah.
Okay. So when we talk about couplepreneurship, we talk about how is the support system for you to her, and her to you. Is she still actively nursing?
She's been a stay-at-home mom.
Okay.
Throughout
Which is
my
what
major
she's
league
been
career.
for quite a while.
Yeah.
But she was a teacher before that, and she helped support the family before that. I have not lost sight of the fact that she was a professional and did by her own right very successful and could do it at any drop of a moment again. Yeah. But the support she offers me to be able to, for us to do what we do, is pivotal.
Yeah.
Like, I can't go do the things I do if she's not taking care of the family I also want.
Yeah.
I want it all,
Yeah.
right? We can have it all. We don't have to sacrifice things.
Yeah.
But how do we balance that in a way that we work-life integrate?
Yeah.
And how does the support system work? So, like, when you start to transition, how do you see her, or how does she see? Have you guys had these conversations?
We have.
Yeah. How does that look when she's like, "This is where I'm at in this with you. How am I going to support you in this role?"
Yeah, we've been starting to have these conversations more and more, and as we've both matured and gained experience in our marriage, we're beginning to realize the skills and the different types of assets that we bring to these situations. And I understood it from early on, and like we talked about, her being able to run our family and take care of our kids in a way that I would never be able to. Right. If it was up to me, they'd already be out on their own trying to figure it out. So she does an incredible job in that way. But then even more so, so she might not be able to throw a fastball 100 miles an hour, but she, in all other areas, is more equipped than me in a lot of the situations, just from her discipline and her mental fortitude and all of these, just characteristics that she has. And I really admire that. But even, diving a little bit deeper, I see, as a male figure in the home, we're kind of wired to provide and protect, and that leads, I believe, like the male mind down this avenue of more intellect and strategy and trying to figure things out and having like a mechanical aspect. Like we want A plus B to equal C, and we want to execute and we want to get that outcome. But a lot of the time, what we miss is the intuition part of it, and that's what I'm noticing more and more.
Yes.
Where my wife can fill in that void, and I think it'd be foolish for me, whether it's in professional sports or whether it's in business, it'd be foolish of me to set out on that journey and exclude her from those conversations. Absolutely. Even if she's not hands-on doing the work in the business, there's so much value that I've had from her of, hey, like, this is what's going on. Let me lay it out for you. just tell me what you feel. Like, tell me what you think. And I've realized the more I've done that and the more she's gotten in tune with the way I'm thinking and the things that I'm strategizing about, she's able to give me advice and that intuition that I lack. Yeah.
1,000%.
Yeah.
That's awesome that you even recognize that.
With you being in business, like for yourself, like we've talked about with the baseball and stuff, she's picked up a lot of stuff.
Oh yeah.
Business wise and stuff like that. Like the
And
same with Bobby
and the way you operate in it too.
Yes.
See, she knows you better than anybody does.
Right.
So when she understands how you are going to react,
Which is scary.
It is, because you're like, how are you in my head that deep? But they are.
You know.
And she's like, well, I've studied you for 13, all these years, you know. So she understands the way you're going to react in those situations. When you talk about the intuition, that's funny because there's so many times when I fought that with her in the past, and she's like, Bobby, I just understand it. Yeah. I understand that this, like, you're in it. So when you're in it, like you said, I'm objective, task oriented, and I'm going to complete this. She's out here looking out going, that's not going to go well. That's a bad business venture. That's a bad partnership.
Right.
They're not good people to deal with, or whatever the story might be.
Yep.
Or you're not going to react very well to that. If that doesn't go this way, I know how you are. I wouldn't even get into that.
Yep.
And I ignored that for so long, and I failed, and I failed, and I failed, until I got to the point where I'm like, what do you think about this? And she would tell me, and I'd think about it for a while, and then I would play devil's advocate, and then she's like, and I'd let her sit on it for a little bit. I'd sit on it. If she didn't shift that mentality, then I took it and went with what she said.
Yeah.
And I will tell you 99.9% of the time, that intuition was almost spot on.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't, we learned something together. So.
And it helps, though, with that, like doing that kind of stuff together will help you guys, too, decide eventually you might be doing stuff together. Like with our clinic and stuff, Bobby runs some of it, and then I do more like with the women,
the operations and
stuff like that. So we end up working together very well. But I mean, that's just taking time.
But I do the business side of it. She does the personnel side of it. In the trucking company, I did everything. You know what I mean? I drove. I did all the backside of stuff, the paperwork, dispatching, payroll, you name it. I did everything. Fixing trucks, you name it. I did it. But in the clinic, when we opened it, it was like, you take care of all the personnel, staffing, rule book stuff, all that, the communication between them. I'll take care of all the business stuff. And then in Limitless, we do everything together. When we talk to people, we do it all together because it's crucial that they understand. She understands the woman's aspect of this, their side, their perspective, and I understand the men's side, but we understand how we work together, and then that's what we help people implement within their businesses. Like, how do you leverage each other to be very successful together, because you're much more powerful if you do that versus opposing each other and like locking horns all the time, like fighting that intuition. You know what I mean?
I mean, this is such a cool point and cool conversation because it's not normal in society. You know, I think the general conception can be is, you know, the man, he goes out and he does this, and it's the woman's job to stay here and do this. And you know, I know women get talked about a lot more now than they ever have, but this really sums up of how you can implement this today in your relationship at home, of seeing that value and the collaboration and how that's going to trickle down. And again, everybody's on their own journey. It's not a race. It's not a race against somebody else. It's not a comparison game. But going back to the mind and the intentionality behind it, if you're trying to build this life, and when you stood up on that altar and in front of all of your family and friends, and you decided to go down this path, the goal was to have the best relationship and the best home that you could possibly have, and this is part of it.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's a huge part of it, and it's funny because I've talked to people that are like looking at business partnerships and stuff, and they're trying to find a good partner, and they never even think to look right in their own home. And I'm like, sometimes the best partner you have is right there next to you and you didn't realize it. You know, you could do it all on your own and just use them. And they're looking for an outside source to come in and be their savior. I'm like, this person here, you should trust more than anything in this world.
And it is, and it's fun and it's challenging and it's all those things, but because it's helped us grow a lot doing it together.
Individually as well.
Yes, we get into each other's minds and how we look at different things, but
it's
not easy,
and you have more skin in the game than anybody else has. At the end of the day, whatever happens, like my wife and I, we're in it for the long haul. So what's good for me is good for her.
And so why not let her opinion be a big aspect of that? You know what I mean? And then what does she also have in her best interest? Your kids. You know what I mean? And their future. And so if she's looking out for that, and you're looking, and us, like you mentioned earlier, we're like hammers. You know what I mean? Everything's a nail, and we're just trying to get it hammered out. But they're a little bit more delicate. You know, so they kind of are able to approach things from a side that we typically are blinded by.
Yep.
Because we're results driven. We like to like your like the coach that came out there and it's like, what the hell are you doing out here?
Yep.
That to me, when I hear that story, is like, it's action time.
Yep.
Shit or get off the pot.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like
Yep.
we've got
Stop
to
wasting
move.
my time.
Let's keep
Yeah.
moving, right?
Yep.
Make a decision and we deal with whatever the outcome is.
Yep.
But make a decision and let's go.
Yep.
I found that a lot easier when I just brought her into the original part of that conversation.
Yep.
The decision was so much quicker and easier.
Yep.
And once I started listening to the intuition and her perspective on things, it makes it easier to make a better, more qualified decision that's educated, and she understands me better than anybody's going to understand. I mean, this woman knows absolutely everything about me that nobody knows about.
Yep.
She knows it.
Yep.
So it's like,
What an advantage.
Yeah.
huge advantage
Yep.
if you think about it that
Yep.
way. So bringing her into this, how is she in public? Does she like to do this? Does she like to speak? Does she like to be in front of a camera? Is she good with all that?
She does.
Used to it?
Yeah,
Good.
she's up for anything. Like I mentioned, she's a beast. She's better at everything, even more so than I am. I'm just kind of like fake it till you make it, and like,
Tell
hey,
me what I need to do.
Hey, honey, am I doing okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so fun. I mean, we were having conversations this morning and just reminding each other of, hey, I bring a little bit of perspective, and we're trying. This is a collaboration effort. We're working together. I fill it in places that you can't fill in, and I've learned to be. Going back to the mindset and the positive mindset of positive in those interactions. And if there's something that I see that's not going well, it's not, hey, like, why are you doing that? Like, don't do that. It's, hey, I see what you're doing. That's such a great thing that you're trying to do. But have you thought about it this way? Hey, this is like how my mind works. I'm thinking 5 years down the road and the results of our actions right now, where a lot of the time she's begun to understand I'm making those decisions right now because it's an emotional, and I feel like I need to make that decision. And man, it's helped so much in so many areas.
Oh, I mean, it's even funny you say that, because that's a whole chapter of life I think we go through, because once you master that, what comes on the other side of it, the clarity that you get from that, it like opens up all these doors that you didn't even know existed. You know what I mean? Yet again, it's leveraging them with you to move forward in this new chapter. And I understand that not everybody out there has that person. And maybe you're seeing this and you're looking for that person. Or maybe you do have that person and they're still developing, because a lot of times we see people where one of them, a lot of times it's the men for some reason, they're on board. Like they're on this journey, but the wives are hesitant to come. And so they're trying to figure out, like, where do I fit into this puzzle? And I think it's really important for them to hear this, for women to hear what other men are saying, like, hey, I was there once. And I just had this conversation with my wife and was like, listen, there was a conversation we had where she's like, I'm afraid you're moving very quick and you're going to leave me behind. And I'm like, I would never leave you behind. I want you to be a part of this. I want you to want to be a part of this. Do you want to be a part of it? Yeah, absolutely. I want to. Then let's go. Grab my hand and let's go. And then she's pulling me. Before I know it, so then she's taking lead on a lot of things, which is spectacular to see that personal growth. Because I understand.
100%.
The more you grow, the more she grows. The more she grows, the more you grow. You just grow together. You know what I mean? Become more powerful that way. And leveraging that is super, super important, and staying really pure to it. Also, I'm sure in the celebrity of everything, it's hard to get distracted. There's people, there's women, there's everybody knows all your stuff. There's all this nonsense going on around you. But if you stay centered, having people in your life like Holiday, you know what I mean, that can keep you centered and understanding what are your core values. What's important to you. Hold that at the nucleus. Keep it there. You know what I mean? Yeah,
and I'll kind of like build on that. Like, it's like the ego. Like, if your ego can easily get inflated, and that's what I found myself early in my career avoiding some conversations with my wife, because it's like, oh, she's not going to understand what I'm talking about. She's not going to understand getting in the weeds of baseball or the mentality and the approach that I have. And there's a couple of things I realized about that is if I can't explain it to her in a way that I feel like she would be able to relate, well, I probably shouldn't be doing it anyways. It's probably over my head. It's too complicated. But then when I have been intentional and had those conversations, I've been blown away by her ability to conceive and say, oh yeah, like, I see that, I understand. And
you're like, do you? It's like maybe I don't understand the mechanics of throwing a ball, but I understand what you're going through with the stress and the pressure of trying to figure it out. I understand that. And if that's what's weighing on you that's screwing the rest up, Let me help you over here, and the rest will work itself out.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
It's crazy. Like, they just don't utilize it. People just don't utilize it enough. It's incredible how powerful it is when you do.
Yep.
So it's awesome that she's game to come. And I mean, you guys have been a part of all of this for a long time, so I get it.
Yeah.
So moving forward then,
okay,
what does the future look like in entrepreneurship for you? What's your goals set on? What's your eyes set on right now? What are you working towards?
Yeah, so a lot of irons in the fire, trying to see which one stands out the most. I'm excited about a lot of different things. The personal branding aspect and being able to share my story, give back to the baseball community, give back to my community in general through those avenues, through social media, stuff like what we're doing today is important. And then I'm trying to, at this point, really make a decision of, do I go out and do I start a franchise business? Do I buy an existing business and go head first into operations? Or do I take a little bit of a segue, get into a business with an operator, learn the business from the inside out, gain some skills, and then see where that takes me? So there's opportunities on both sides. And, it's like a balance of being ambitious and having a plan, but also at the same time kind of letting the wind take me where it takes me.
Right.
And so that's where I'm at today. And but I mean, the marriage conversation, it's like that has to be first and foremost, because I'm not going to be successful in anything if I'm not pushing myself to be the best husband and father that I can be. So taking some time right now after 10 years of traveling and being gone from home, to reacclimate myself in the home. Right. It was funny, before I came up to Columbia for this speaking opportunity, we were at our friend's house, at the neighbor's house, playing football in the backyard, and that's why I have all of these scratches on my face. I was
like, maybe you just been through a meat grinder.
Yeah.
It's been a long couple of days. I don't know.
That's what my wife said. She's like, make sure you tell them what happened. She's like, tell them you were trying to catch a football and ran into a tree, and that.
Oh no.
She's like, that's the competitive athlete in you. Yeah. You can't take that away. She's like, they're gonna think that you got in a bar fight. I was like, a bar fight? I was like, I've never been in a bar fight. What?
With a cat or what?
Yeah,
tore up.
Exactly. I was like, what do you mean? I'm like, I like that you think of me as this like rough and tough like bar fighting man. Like, I'll take that. That's a compliment.
I guess, unless you don't want them thinking you were in the bar in the first place.
Exactly. That was my point to her.
So he hit a tree. So this is why he's a little tore up. He hit a tree.
Yeah.
Playing football, but football, baseball doesn't matter. You're competitive. So
yeah.
So that'll take you far, though. That'll take you far in the business world
that was my fear of stepping away from baseball, is how do I express this competitiveness? I mean, that's one of the best things, other than the camaraderie of being on a team and having your brothers that you're going into battle with every single day. The second aspect is that physical mano-y-mano, like one of us is walking off this field, a winner and a loser. And, how do I find a way to replace that outside of baseball? And, I don't know if that's going to be easy, but I think there are paths to doing that and accomplishing that in the business world. It may not be as celebrated. I may not have reporters sitting at my house every single day to ask me how my day went. But I've also learned to celebrate those victories. Yeah. Celebrate the small wins that nobody else is going to see. And I found so much satisfaction in that. And really kind of like rounding out the conversation is like, this is a daily effort. Like, it doesn't get easier. I actually believe as we get older, it becomes even harder because we have this track record of all these things that we're reminded of. And, there's been times in baseball, I've been at the highest highs and the lowest of lows. I've been recognized as the top player in the game and the worst player in the game. And it's how do you show up every day at a consistent level to where nobody can really even recognize that you had a bad day or had a great day. And so that's been the challenge for myself in the path that I want to go on. But it is so hard. It is so hard to wake up, much like getting in the gym to work out. Like your mind tells you, you don't need to do that. It's okay to take the day off. Or mentally, it's okay to think negatively about this situation. No, I have to be intentional in shifting my mind and my focus. And one of our good friends, Travis Griffin, he talks about this a lot. Every action starts with a thought, and our actions are led by the thoughts that we're having. And so that for me has become such a focus, especially in this transition phase where my mind's telling me, hey man, you don't know how to do anything else. All you've done your whole life is play baseball. What do you think you're doing getting on stage and helping other people? Like, what do you think you're doing getting in front of a microphone and talking about business and relationships? You're just a baseball player, and it's the intentionality to override that. Yeah. And because I know
the imposter syndrome almost.
The imposter syndrome. Yeah.
But see, the reason you're qualified is because you've been there.
Yeah.
So whether you're talking to other baseball players, you're talking to people about mentality, you've been there.
Yeah.
I can speak on it because I've done it.
Yeah.
I've overcome the challenges. I've been successful in it to whatever degree I want it, I consider it successful. So I can speak on it.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I don't belong up here.
Yeah. And what I've learned too is talking to successful business owners. I've seen it. I've seen it in baseball. But then I've also had the opportunity to be around, guys in your shoes, Bobby, who have done it, and it's the same feeling. Yeah. You've gone through the same pains. You've gone through the same type of growth where I know what I want to be. Mm-hmm. I'm so far from it, but these are the steps that I have to take to get there. And you have to be very intentional about reminding yourself the path that you're on.
That's exciting too.
Yeah.
Because when you start to see that new venture, like instead of looking at what you needed to grow in baseball to achieve whatever you needed to achieve there, you're looking at this new venture going, okay, now I see this whole path. And I see like what resembles not an end, but like a goal.
Yeah.
And it's way up there.
Yeah.
And if you fall in love with that process, let me get this right. It's not necessarily that you have to fall in love with the process. This is something I had to go back on myself a little bit, because I'm not saying that you have to love but you have to do it.
Yeah.
You have to go through it, and you have to understand that that's the process it takes to get where you're wanting to go. Those are the steps you got to take.
Yeah.
Okay. So when I say fall in love with the process, you really don't have a choice.
Yeah.
Because if you don't go through the process and you don't enjoy it and you're not intentional about your mindset doing it, then you're going to be miserable. So you might as well be happy while you're doing it. So fall in love with the process.
Yeah.
But that's exciting. It's exciting to be like, oh, I got a whole new venture going on, a whole new opportunity, and let me leverage everything I've built over here in professional sports to now share that with other people and grow business and use that recognition.
Bring your wife and your family along with you now. It is fun.
Look at Ozzie Smith. Look at everything he did after baseball.
Incredible.
You know what I mean?
And it'd be so easy to look at him and say, oh, that was easy for him. Things just fell into place, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. Like, sure, from the outside looking in, it looks that way. But he's had to put in a lot of work and effort, intentionality to get to where he is. For a long time.
For a long time now. And I was sitting next to him at a fight, at an NFA fight in St. Louis, and I didn't even recognize him. And the guy, the promoter, Brad Carey, he come over and he's like, hey, do you want to meet Ozzie Smith? And I'm like, where? And he's like, he's right there. And I'm like, that's Ozzie Smith? He's like, yeah, he loves these things. He comes all the time. And I'm like, well, no, I don't want to be that guy. You know what I mean? I don't want to be like, oh, yeah, I want to meet him. But no, so I think it's not only ambitious and awesome to hear that that's your next chapter. I'm so happy you came on here to talk to us about it, because like, I want to know who you are in your personal life. I want to know what business, because is there a life that coexists where baseball and business meet? I know, like, there's companies like P3, there's these training camps and these, like, so that's what you know. That's your wheelhouse, right? So have you ever looked at a business venture where those two coexist?
Definitely. And even aside from the business venture side of it, like, I would love to take the knowledge and skills that I have and be able to pass those along and help out the next generation with the experience that I've had, because a few weeks ago I went to an event in Miami, PBR baseball event. So it's a prep baseball report, and what they do is they sponsor this All-American game.